Welcome, everyone. You are listening and watching simultaneously Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report Perspectives, for which I thank you and congratulations. Press like, subscribe. Rashkin Report Perspectives is me, Yuri Rashkin, and Silicon Curtain is Jonathan Fink. Jonathan, how's it going, man?
It's good. It's good. Can you hear me there? My browser seems to have frozen. Am I coming through?
You're coming through loud and clear. Everything is
Well,
clear,
that's
but of
good.
course,
That's a relief.
write in comments in the chat. Let us know what is the quality of video. Hey, if nothing else, it wakes up the algorithm. Thanks to you, Jonathan. You're putting out such quality content because you're traveling. You're going to Ukraine. I'm having all these remarkable experiences in front of a computer with views and audiences that are just like blowing up right now. I think I decided to do what I can to follow Jason Smart. I mean, that's not the worst way to go, and but you are traveling and you are back now. Congratulations! I'm glad you're back safe, and because last time when we spoke, you were in Kiev, and Kiev. And I think that's pretty awesome. Right. We'll keep working at it. I will too. I'm not used to it. I thought it was Kiev, but it's definitely not. So you're missing out on, when we talk about pounds, it's, I'm used to like weight, but you're used to, you understand pounds as like money, dollars, I mean, currency. And you're investing into the story. And, so hit like, subscribe to Jonathan right now and support him if you can, however you can. It's the right thing to do. Jonathan, why the hell are you doing all of this?
Well, there's multiple reasons. I mean, one that I think certainly you'll appreciate perspective is the making up for the bad choices in my life. I mean, one is I chose to learn Russian and not Ukrainian. Actually, it's a good choice because I think it's good to understand what's going on. And I think I'd be rather anxious without that. It's useful. The other bad choice, of course, is choosing to do marketing as a professional career. And as I explain to people at parties, sending people shit they don't need for money they don't have. So I'm now tackling, I would say, the lies, making up for that. It's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing. I'm making up for the alter ego that's done tremendous evil in the world through
Were you successful at that?
Yeah, I sell quite a lot of shampoo and stuff, for evil companies, especially ones that carried on working in Moscow until pretty much last year. I mean, many of these large corporations have, they call it greenwashing and pink washing and all the different things where they associate themselves with certain values that they don't uphold and support. And one of the companies I did projects for was certainly in that kind of thing. But no, that's the sort of slightly facetious answer. I mean, one of the answers, of course, is that I've had a sense that something like this was going to happen, and people may say, "Yeah, whatever." Everyone says that. That's easy with 2020 vision. But in 1992, I sat with quite a lot of beer and, dare I say it, some other illicit stuff on top of one of the cooling towers of Moscow State University shortly after the wall had come down, and Russia had demonstrably lost the Cold War, or the Soviet Union had, and it had just devolved into, I'd say, being Russia as opposed to the Soviet Union, because Gorbachev had been deposed the year before, and the year after I was there, Yeltsin was, let's say, shelling the White House, the Bielый Dom in the center of Moscow. I actually knew someone who was a professor, or he went on to be a professor at the university, and he was actually calling me while they were shooting the White House, and his apartment overlooked the park near the embankment there where it was happening. So I had a running commentary of people being shot in the streets, so you're right there, front row seat of history. But while I was sitting in my inebriated state on top of Moscow State University, I played over some of the conversations I've had with taxi drivers and with teachers and various people, and it occurred to me that they don't know they've lost. They know that they've lost an empire, and that rankles. They know that they've lost status and a certain standard of living, but there's no collective sense of actually losing a war. And in the phrase that's now become infamous, "Można powtórzyć," we can do it again. And I've always had that sense, which has then started building to a crescendo after 2012. actually 2008, of course, and the invasion of Georgia. And we've had more and more evidence that this is the case. It's not just Putin. It's a sort of collective sense that we can repeat and we will repeat and we must repeat this sort of outward aggression.
Jonathan, I feel like I have a Russian type of question for you, but I want to, before I ask that, I want to make sure that your sound is, picture is great, but I feel like there's slight crackling in the sound.
There's a slight crackling, so I'm closing various tabs. I think that's
maybe
slowness of the processor, and that'll cure it. It's done it before. I probably need a higher powered laptop.
So then here's my Russian question. When I speak to Russian speaking journalists, there's this always, oh, Obama, everything was kind of okay until Obama, because according to Ukrainians, he is the one who really dropped the ball. That's when Crimea went down. That's when a lot of things happened. And then who was after Obama? Well, Trump. So that's pretty clear now, especially. And in the middle, there was a Biden who didn't do enough. And Russians like to have this, ask this question of each other, which baffles me because it seems really stupid, is when did we lose Russia? And I go, you never had it. There was nothing to lose. The only thing you can do in Russia is leave. But there are these points, benchmarks, where they feel like, did we lose it in this year or at this protest or at that? And it feels like maybe if 1993 perhaps was the real time where that shelling of the parliament that you were there for and basically witnessing, that was the time that I think really consensus is that there was like democracy for a couple of years and then it died again. But what do you think about American policy from where you're sitting? Because you're not experiencing it from a Ukrainian point of view. You're not quite there, but at the same time, we're now seeing that the United States maybe is this apex of failure of foreign policy that, in my opinion, we can easily trace it back to Bush, who saw soul in Putin's eyes and then gave Russia its best 10 years because of the wars that we got engaged in and the priorities that were under that Republican administration that didn't, make Russia reevaluate its priorities. If anything, that's what the Munich speech came up, 2007, right? So, or maybe it was really Clinton, because Clinton is the one who didn't pay attention when Soviet Union fell apart and then 1993 happened and all of those things. How do you view an American policy? Or is this just a one grand scheme of failure, one after another, of various degrees and levels?
Well, I think we have to be clear that ultimately Russia lost itself by not finding a post-imperial identity. Let's be absolutely clear here, because it's the tendency is to always push outwards. And now she's not a great example, but Yuri Rashkin. But if you listen to many of the so-called opposition, they will try to find causation that is external to Russia for why this whole process has failed. Ultimately, Ukrainians don't tend to do that. They tend to examine their internal issues and problems and discuss them, sometimes, in very visceral and boisterous ways. They may look to Russia to some of their problems, but essentially they don't point the finger at Russia for ruining everything. It's like Russia's always going to try to destabilize you. It's our fault for, by internet and allowing that to happen and not pushing key thing in the different conversations that I've had. Ukrainians will say it was our fault.
Lost you there? You're Jonathan.
Oh, we're back again.
Yes.
Dropped out a little bit there.
Yes, the crackling does slightly continue.
It's I've shut everything down, so hopefully it will go away momentarily. It's this looking for external problems or internal problems. Ukrainians will often frame it as this is our fault for not pushing back on Russian propaganda. This is our fault for not reforming our media, for not tackling oligarchy, etc. Whereas Russians will tend to look to external causes, often in these conversations. Well, it's because the West didn't do this, because somebody did that. I think it's a feature of people who have not had agency, have no sense of their agency, and have never had the opportunity to express that agency. And their relationship with the state is very much one of resources are controlled by the state. And if you show conformity to that state, you'll be able to get your foot on that vertical of resources. And, you know, when things go wrong, it's not necessarily the fault of the czar at the apex, but it's somewhere along that pyramid that it's a problem. Or you look to external. You know, the West didn't do enough in this year or that year, or they did various things. And there are many ways in which, of course, we did fail to understand what's going on in Russia. No different from now. We fail to understand that now, and we fail to understand some of the problems in our own society. But ultimately, these can only be resolved by people exercising their own political agency. And I think Ukrainians realize that. If they hadn't, then the multiple attempts to interfere in their system would have triumphed. They may not have had the revolutions, the multiple revolutions they've had, and 2014 would have failed, unfortunately, in much the way that the one in Belarus failed. There are various reasons for that. So I think there's an ultimate difference here, which is quite telling. But there were points at which certainly the tide was lost when there wasn't a critical mass in 2012 to push back, and you know the forces unleashed in Bolotnaya were essentially sort of crushed in the years to come. There was a failure in 1993, obviously, to absolutely side with Yeltsin and endorse the extraordinary illegality of shelling their own parliament building. And then there was 1996, where we were desperate for Yeltsin to win, and we helped to lean in and distort the democratic system such as it was. I don't actually believe there really was that much democracy. It was extremely nascent. I mean, democracy is having a peaceful handover of power, an orderly handover of power several times, which Ukraine has experienced and Russia has never actually experienced. You had Yeltsin essentially deposed Gorbachev in an extraordinary political move, and then Yeltsin appointed his successor. So where is the democratic transition here? How can one even call it democracy when there has been no formal handover of power through an electoral process, not just once, but several times? It's never happened.
That's a slightly different question, but yes. I don't understand. I mean, I didn't for a long time, I guess, why Putin even wants to be a president. What's the ups? I mean, if he's never going to leave, does he want to be known as president for life? Or, I mean, is it just better to be like, a monarch, King Vladimir I? I mean, why not even go that route? What is he, but he's holding on to these trappings of democracy. Like it matters. It's weird.
Yes, that's the bit I don't understand. But then the Soviet Union did something similar in the sort of legalism within the language and the pretense that it was adopting certain norms and processes and procedures.
I mean, Putin just rewrote the constitution so he could stay in until 36. I mean, yes. Why constitution? Why bother?
Why do you bother? Weird. Why do you bother with any of that? Exactly.
Why have lawyers if you have a stick?
Yeah, I think it's because you need in the Soviet Union. I think the Soviet government genuinely wanted to not be considered barbaric. It wanted to be considered a civilizational project. Therefore, it needed to copy and ape, some of the trappings of a Western democracy. And actually, ironically, if you look at it. Ignoring sort of Tsardom, because I think that's another whole period, which is somewhat different and more complex. But essentially, what was the Soviet Union? It was a structure that allowed a small number of people to essentially live a middle-class lifestyle materially, because what was considered appropriate in the direction of Western civilization in the 20th century was towards a large affluent middle class and a certain standard of living. So if you want to have status, if you want to be thought of as civilized, then many of the communist leadership were not living dramatically luxurious lifestyles compared to us, but those lifestyles were exceedingly more luxurious than the rest of the population. But essentially, it's also trying to copy and mimic certain sort of so-called standards of the civilized West. What's fashionable now, of course, or what we get on social media and in the media, of course, is extreme wealth. Let's say the billionaire class are often pictured or held up to be, the marker of our civilization now and having made it. I know people will be screaming here, that's not what I think, etc. But I think, Russia is partly, trying to copy that, so that again a very small number of people can live an extremely privileged status to say, we're no better than you, we're no worse than you. It's almost a sort of like, you think you're superior to us, but we have a civilizational project and we've got billionaires, we're no worse than you.
But they also had czars for a long time, but then they killed the last one. So is this like a bad omen to be a czar again in Russia? Even in China, Xi Jinping, has like a title. It's the titles matter. Legalisms, I guess, matter. Maybe this is like just a framework on which any power relies, and so be it. It's in the meantime, we have so much that this world is just blowing up in every direction.
So much to unpack apart.
It's almost nice to stop and wax philosophical and look at the big picture for a second, because there's negotiations, there's Putin in India, there's United States and everything that's happening here, and that's just nuts.
But Russia's still a feudal system. It's still a feudal system in some ways, where whatever material resources and status you get comes from that vertical, from the state. Or if you're, one of the people who are higher up the pyramid, you have license to thieve, but a certain amount, or cultivate a certain part of the economy. And this is where I think Trumpism and Putinism, to sort of bring it into the present day, are unfortunately quite aligned, because they both have this very extractive idea, a pre-industrial idea of the world, which is not, an industrial or post-industrial view where the wealth you can generate, the material you can generate, is a multiple of what was conceivable in previous ages through automation and mechanization. Therefore, the main problem of society is how you distribute resources. Creating resources is no longer such a problem as it was in previous ages. Whereas Russia and indeed Trump's mentality are still built on a pre-industrial scarcity model, which is you got to fight for those resources. And if you don't fight for them, you're probably going to sort of starve or end up being humiliated at the bottom of the pyramid. There's a certain alignment, I'd say, in this very narrow, a very punitive and extractive view of the world.
In this very transactional and extractive world, I'm noticing a paradox that perhaps our listeners can help me clear up. Because on one hand, this group of people, the Kushner, Vitkov, that are negotiating, Dmitriev, they're showing that it's not about borders, it's about the dough. It's about money. It doesn't matter where you are, which is like a 21st century kind of a thought. Borders don't matter. But at the same time, they all want bigger country. Russia wants to be bigger. States, apparently, we want Greenland and Canada. And how does this work?
Again, I think, let's do a simple comparison to how Trump and Putin manage their cabinet sessions, I guess we call them in the UK, which is where your advisors and governors come together. There's an extraordinary similarity, and essentially it's a piece of theatre. It's a hollow piece of theatre built on conformity, obsequiousness, and essentially there's a big dollop of humiliation in there. Yeah, lots of humiliation. And I think Trump certainly gets a thrill out of that. I won't say what kind of a thrill, but it clearly
relaxes him enough to go to sleep.
That's right. No, he gets a vicarious pleasure in some sort out of the discomfort, pain, and others, and of putting them in their place, realizing that he's had an effect on them, realizing that he has coerced them and instilled a level of sort of fear and conformity in them. It's almost identical to the way Putin has stage managed his own sort of cabinet sessions. But this is where I think there's a dividing point. Whereas Witkoff, Kushner, and Trump are entirely transactional, and they're looking to enrich themselves as the final and ultimate status and purpose of life. I mean, really, they're avaricious, and yet there's a kind of bandit economic logic here. Putin has moved beyond this. He doesn't need all of that wealth. I mean, I think of him often as Smaug, and if you look at the original illustration on The Hobbit, there's a curious resemblance to Putin as well. He doesn't need this gold. He can't eat it. He can't. It's an obsession there to acquire more, but that's not the end in itself. It's the control over others. It's the historical delusions. It's the need to have ever greater sort of power and to make sure that there are no rivals that are getting close to you. I don't think Trump really cares too much about rivals. He's not going to appoint people who threaten him, who aren't conformist to him. But I don't think he's that worried about people coming up through the system to challenge him. Whereas Putin, it's a far more sort of visceral kind of rule. But what he's looking for is something actually beyond money. That's the problem with, I think, these so-called peace talks, which are entirely phantom and phony. There's a complete misalignment in aspirations and mutual misunderstanding between Trump's team and Putin and his aims.
There are some interesting nuances between them because, yes, there's a lot of similarities, but Trump wants to celebrate himself by having himself a convention hall being built next to the White House with his name on it, and that's going to be sufficient. You know, if only Putin was thinking in those terms, because Putin wants to add a whole new territory. So Trump is kind of like starting out. So I think maybe Putin has just been at this for a while longer, a quarter century, and he still thinks he's got until 150 to go. And Trump is looking at this more transactionally, as in faster now everything. And so the projects are a little less ambitious, and the money, it's just money. I mean, he's selling pardons. It's incredible, because I was having this conversation in Russian with the saying like that there's Ukraine is asking for guarantees, and guarantees are nice, but we all would like to have guarantees against Donald Trump. Is there a guarantee that we can all purchase? Apparently there is. Is it a bribe? If you can bribe him, then you can have a pardon. So, I mean, it's a very transactional, at its most transactionalist relationships, but he still wants Canada. He still wants Greenland, but just maybe that's like tomorrow. But today we'll just sell some pardons.
Well, that's it, or particular gold baubles that money can't buy. I mean, if you count the Nobel Prize as a particularly fine gold bauble,
he should really just take over Norway if he wants that peace. If he wants that peace prize, it's going to be easiest if he occupies Norway.
He's going after the wrong country. I mean, Denmark can't give him a Nobel Peace Prize. It's the one next door, as it were. By a curious irony, I did debate yesterday one of the Kremlin's key assets in European academia, who happens to be Norway-based.
How did it go?
Well, the irony is this character has blocked me on every single social platform, but I got to debate him face to face, and he's unlike some of the sort of complete clowns like Tucker Carlson, who I'm pretty sure I could dismember if given the chance. This guy is unfortunately quite smart and eloquent, but he did come out with the usual tropes. Russia cannot be beaten. 2014 was a CIA-backed coup. What about the sort of Newland, McCain conniving to dictate who's in the Ukrainian government, and NATO expansion? It was all the kind of classic tropes. And I argued, I would say fairly politely, until he said, and of course, Russia goes out of its way not to target civilians. At that point, I fairly well lost it and started shouting at him. But there we go.
Will the video be available?
Apparently, it's going to be on X. I don't know if they'll edit out my rant, but let's see.
Or maybe they'll start with it.
Yeah, no, I said quite clearly, this is wrong. I have seen numerous sites of absolute civilian slaughter. I've seen a maternity hospital on the route from Buch into Kiev, a clinic with a tank round in the side. And there were actually people, no one died apparently, fortunately, but there were pregnant women in that clinic at the time when a tank round was punched in the side of the building. I mean, this is a lie that is so monstrous and so ludicrous. But actually, here's the other commonality. And unfortunately, this is one where the media seem to be sucked into this over and over again, is to take Trump at his word, either literally be outraged by it or take his, other pronouncements as being true and intent of policy. He deploys lies in the way Putin does. It's weaponized, grade lies. Everything is extraordinary lies, and it is a tool of their power and influence.
Well, and there's a way to deploy this, and it's interesting how we all have certain red no cross lines in our minds, and with Russians and Ukrainians, the line often goes through Crimea. Who's Crimea? Okay, I know which side you're on. And with what you mentioned, it's very, because I'm thinking to watching an interview that Dmitriev gave to CNN, and it felt like, not just because I am kind of biased, but everybody, including the anchors who were trying to be as professional as they could be, when it gets to Russia does not specifically target civilians, where it's like, no, come on, this is not happening. But when you look at the lying factor of lying, they look at information and words as a tool. And the last thing Putin is going to do is tell the truth, because he's been professionally trained not to do that. And he is decent enough at that. So, I mean, he might make up cities on the map where he describes what happened where, rename things, make up military operations. That's typical. But to tell the truth, not likely. Trump, on the other hand, just fails at everything and then announces that he succeeded. And that's a lie, but that's his type of using words as tools of, victory. I'm just going to, and it's an interesting way to continuously get rid of supporters, because at any moment when he loses again, people have to say, oh, he won, and then they're Trump supporters, or go like, did he? And then you're no longer a Trump supporter. So it's this awakening that occurs when people go, no, wait a minute. And really, that's why we thought that 6th of January 2021 was going to be so powerful and clear, because like everybody saw it.
But alas, no. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Putin realizes that the truth in one moment, where you can have alignment and unity, you always have a go at dividing and conquering, which is the title I've given this. It reminds me a little bit of, have you ever seen that film with Keanu Reeves? It's The Devil's Advocate. And
I did, but it was a long time ago.
A long time ago,
right?
But it's Al Pacino, who's phenomenal in that, maybe one of the best things he's done. And of course, the devil fails at the end, but changes his identity and tries a different strategy at the end of the film. And this is continuous. And if people don't get that this compulsion to divide and conquer, and the use of strategic lies as well as coercion is not something that is going to carry on for as long as Muscovy is an imperial project, then they're deluding themselves. And this, unfortunately, is the peace process. And the very idea of a peace process, it implies some kind of silencing of the guns at the end of that process, whereas that's not going to happen. It's just one phase of warfare ends to be replaced by another phase of warfare, which is likely to be just as multi-layered as the one we're going through. And going back to the lies, the difference in mechanic, I think Trump, like many sociopaths and even psychopaths will come out with a story that for a moment he may know doesn't reflect reality, but there is no real sense of reality. There is just narratives that fail, and there's narratives that succeed. The ones that succeed in the moment, and that is whether they have been able to manipulate events and people's behaviors in the way you want. By trying to look at this as some coherent progression of reality is wrong. This is a progression of words and narratives that he uses to manipulate the outside world to his advantage, and that's all it is. They have no life beyond that moment. The minute they stop being effective, they're discarded and placed by another experiment in word salad.
The problem is that we have the same approach with this administration to everything, to laws, to peace deals, to anything. Right now, there's a big controversy blowing up in Russian language space because Yuri Shvets recorded a video which got lots of views, but I started getting questions about it. The CAATSA law, which basically forbids United States from messing with territorial integrity of Ukraine. Like everything we're doing is violating not just United States law, but United States law that Donald Trump signed in 2017.
Yeah.
And this is, if you need another reminder of what Donald Trump thinks about laws and how he follows them and deals that he makes, it's a very transactional at the moment kind of a thing, because I think the key here is consequences. Like when Dmitriev lies, is there consequence for his lying? No. But if he's going to tell the truth, is there going to be consequence? You bet. So I think that's kind of the reality that we need to just, remember.
That's it. And I think also there's a mechanic to, actually, this is probably a commonality in both, but there's a mechanic to the Russian lies as well. They are not simply intended to impose will. Yeah. They're not simply there to they're not simply there to coerce other people and to manipulate reality. They also have a signaling mechanism, because if you repeat the lie, it means you are either signaling conformity in the full knowledge that you're lying, and that it is a lie, but you come complicit in that lie, and therefore you signal that you're not a threat to the regime. It's a kind of signal that maybe animals will make to each other, etc. But also when Europeans, as the Premier of Belgium has just done, you repeat a whole concoction of Russian nonsense narratives as if that was somehow reality and policy. You may not be doing that to signal conformity to Putin, but to Putin, that does signal your extreme weakness and your inability to stand up for your own values and to resist whatever it is he's trying to achieve. So this is extremely dangerous, because if you give that green light through the repetition of Russian narratives, you are either conforming or you are signaling defeat and surrender. And I think too few people understand the power of words and the perception of them in the Kremlin. Signaling the green light invites more aggression. It quite literally is the opposite of deterrence.
This is where I think in English it's sometimes hard to understand to what extent truth and transparency and ethical behavior are foreign concepts for a reason, but they still are foreign concepts. And so I think that we look at how the system functions, and it seems like it almost doesn't make sense that it hasn't fallen apart. But in the United States, it seems like pretty soon, if things keep going, which the way they are going, but they're likely to change because we'll, I think, still have elections, is, the joke was that people are going to be asked upon entering the United States, who won the 2020 election? If you say Biden, you're not getting in. But if you can say Trump, are you willing to be naked and say that the king is naked? That if you are, then come on in. But if the emperor, you have to say that emperor has no clothes. Well, we don't need people like that in our country. It's an interesting approach. And now
I did have to submit my social profiles when it came to Washington in the summer, which made me a little bit nervous, I have to say.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, but nonetheless, Belgium and what they're going through, and your European Union, which has been some source of some good news lately in the last like 24 hours, that they're looking to actually hand over 210 billion euros and take that away and from Russia and do something. It's is this just a result of their realizing that the United States is really that unreliable and the danger is that real and Ukraine is that important?
I think this realization is not fully landed yet. It's starting to land in Germany and so on. But I think we've got a lot more to come. And of course, we'll cover this in future conversations because there's so much to talk about. I think we're not even hit the worst of it yet. We had a hint of it with Scott Bessent coming out and basically saying, well, do you know what? We're not going to come and save you. Well, we might sell you some weapons. But we also have Karen Leavitt saying, well, we can't sell you weapons forever, even though that's the very point of a capitalist military industrial complex. Sell weapons to create your own jobs at a profit. So we're getting these extraordinary kind of mixed signals. And I rather fear that at the moment this is part of Trump's real estate negotiating tactic to put, untoward, irrational, extreme pressure on Europeans to give in to these transactional demands by making incredible threats like, you're on your own, Russia's super powerful, they're going to walk all over you, we can't come in and defend you, it's like it's over, guys. Whether or not there's a reality in any of these things, it's a negotiating tactic. But that could easily transition into, oops, Europe's actually invaded. Are we going to go in? Yeah, probably not. Then that feeds into this idea of inevitability and surrender and defeat. We're on a very dangerous trajectory here where the negotiating tactics chosen by Trump could very well, whether he realizes or not, transform into the reality of a sort of third world war.
Well, that's just something I've been expecting. Only this time, I feel like we're going to have the reverse of World War II, where Russia and the United States could be together against Europe and Germany and Japan. There could be
But
some
they still
interesting
believe they can divide
alliances.
Russia. I think this is still in the belief that they can divide Russia from China. So that's fundamentally a delusional belief. So Trump may think, we're going to remain neutral in this thing. At some point, he might find himself in the pincer of China, turning its gaze to the US.
That could be it too. Yes, I think the whole concept of grifting has been really eye-opening to Ukrainians. I feel like they just could not believe that Trump is just like that. Like, no, I mean, he's an American president. Surely, I mean, come on, really? Yeah,
Certainly, at the start of this year, I think many in Ukraine had a far more optimistic view of what Trump could do for Ukraine. But Ukrainians, by and large, it seems to me, not only are they stubborn, but they also do not like engaging in these imaginary games. So when they see what's actually happening, they call it out. So I think most Ukrainians are now looking at this, going, "Yep, he's not our friend, and nothing good is going to come of this." So we just have to try and make the best of a bad situation. I think there is now less delusion about Trump on the Ukrainian side than there is still on the Western side. And the highest delusion, which we'll probably have to pick up in the next chat, the highest delusion is amongst pro-Ukraine conservatives. And maybe behind the scenes they have the same level of cynicism that we do, or a similar level, but they're signaling, their public signaling, they cannot, probably because they'll be excluded, and whatever power they have to lobby and whatever will be cut off. They have to partly signal some conformity to the orange monster in order to carry on. And maybe they don't want to believe that their country and even their tribe, their conservative tribe, is lost, and they're delaying that point where they have to actually turn in to fight it. But I think we are far more delusional and divided than Ukrainians are, because they're faced with the existential struggle for existence. So they have no time for this kind of BS and these word games.
And that's we can wrap it up at that
Yeah.
at this point. But I just want to throw in there that for those that are curious how Ukraine is doing, obviously check in with Silicon Curtain and Rashkin Report perspectives. But my perception is, and we'll discuss this much more in our upcoming episodes, is that all the shuffles and the personnel that Ukraine has experienced did not weaken Zelensky as our administration may have hoped. And Zelensky seems to be in pretty good, in charge as ever, according to Ukrainians. So I'm curious if this is some kind of a, smoke screen, but it looks pretty solid from here.
Ukraine is not just Zelensky. This is a big misunderstanding of both Putin, I think, and Trump. Ukraine is much bigger. Oh, Yermak. It's much bigger than Yermak. It's much bigger than Zelensky. And people will fight. They're not fighting for their leader. They're fighting for other more universal values there. So this is a big miscalculation, which will unfold in the coming weeks, and we'll be here to cover it, Yuri.
That's right. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Jonathan. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.